let's bounce back and forth with these. I'll go first with my dev tool tip of the week. This one is a classic developer tool, not in the same vein of the ones that we've been talking about, but Alfred. Like, everybody's been telling me to install it since I got a MacBook like 10 years ago, but I finally installed it, and by God, it's really good. I've grappled with Spotlight so much on so many computers. Like, the example I give to my girlfriend is I try to open Spotify with Spotlight, and it just keeps opening up the installer. But Alfred doesn't do that. It remembers what I chose.
Yeah, for sure. Alfred's great. It's one of the sort of instrumental things in my workflow.
Yeah, I haven't really gotten into the workflows yet.
Oh yeah, they're good.
Like, making it really good. Like, what sold me on like getting it after so long was the 1Password integration. Like, I got my identity stolen a few times last year on various different sites, and was like, no more. And I finally went all in on 1Password, and it's been great. I really like it. And Alfred has the ability to take your entries in 1Password and just open them and log you in automatically, which is just like mind-blowing.
Yeah, both tools, very awesome. I also use them, highly recommended. I'll switch over to my dev tooltip, which is a little bit different, not necessarily a personal tool. One of the problem areas that I like a lot is thinking about refactoring, especially automated refactoring at a large scale. So maybe if you're in the JavaScript ecosystem, you've heard of code mods. Facebook has a tool of the same name, code mod, that like sort of does this idea of like having automated refactorings. And React uses this a lot. So they'll release a version that might have like some syntactical change or something, and to like ease developer adoption, they'll write a code mod for it. But to really sort of like have that sort of functionality at a broader scale across potentially many languages, there's this really interesting tool called symgrep. So if you've ever used grep before, you might know what that is. You know, it's like a simple CLI tool to just find things. But this is a lot
fancy
more
word for searching.
Yeah. This is a lot more powerful, and it gives a lot of semantic information about the code. So it's like you can search on very specific patterns, and it's incredibly powerful and pretty cool. This is not the only tool in this space. There are others, and unfortunately I can't remember their names now, but I will look them up and put them in show notes. There's one in particular, I think it's called like Hive or something. I don't know. But it's made by one of the people at SourceGraph, and it's also really cool and has some other interesting properties. Or maybe it's Comb. Anyway, one of those. I'll put that in the show notes, though.
Yeah, I'm interested to see how that works, because the code mod tools you mentioned, I'm pretty sure they work on ASTs. Do you know if this works in a similar way?
I'm
it's
not.
Just magic to you?
I'm not. Well, no, it's not complete magic, but I'm not 100% sure. So this other tool that I'm trying to think of the name of, I think it actually might be Comb, works a little bit more magically, where it does not run on ASTs, but it has this like generic sort of pattern matching that it does. But it's like syntactically very smart. Symgrep is like somewhat similar in that, but again, I don't know specifically if it's parsing your source code and turning it into an AST. One thing that I'll say about SymDev in particular, obviously this isn't a tool I have used myself personally, but they also have this collection of patterns that you can download. So they'll have like, hey, here's how you can find these security, like this classification of products. So I just thought that was a really interesting addition.
That's pretty cool. It's like ESLint with refactoring.
Yeah.
So my next tool is a node version manager. There's a whole bunch of them, but a whole bunch of them are really hard to use and assume the wrong things. The one that I've settled on after years of switching between MVM, NodeEnv, and all the rest is TJ's N. Very simple, hard to Google repo. It's just like dead simple node version management. You run N auto, it detects what version it needs to install, and it installs it for you without any fuss and without messing up the path on your system to Node, which is like a real key thing for me. I want Node to be where Node is, and not to have like weird hoops being jumped through on my terminal just to run Node.
Yeah, for sure. Maybe I'll give a shout out in a similar vein. I don't use N, but I use this tool called ASDF, which is maybe not necessarily as directly ergonomic for just Node, but the nice thing is it manages versions for a lot of things. So I use it for Node, I use it for Ruby, I use it for Elixir. It is pretty got pretty good broad plugin support, which has been pretty nice. But again, talking about the CLI ergonomic perspective, sometimes these tools are a little bit hard because it's hard to remember the command that you're using. So I'm actually going to give another tool tip about this tool called Fig. So Fig is a early startup. They just went through YC recently, but it's essentially they have a grand vision for what it will be. But yeah, it's autocomplete for your terminal, but it's like really good autocomplete. I do have access.
Yeah, I've been lusting after it.
I can send you an invite code.
Ooh, you should send me an invite code, because it looks so much nicer. Like if you've never built a CLI before, you may not know what goes into giving bash or ZSH completions, and let me tell you, it sucks.
Yeah.
Typically, the tool will have to expose a separate command called install completions, where it will like literally put bash code somewhere on your system in the hopes that your terminal will use it for completions. And those completions, they're not the best looking. They're just plain text. Depending on the shell you're using, they may not be the easiest thing to use. And it's just really hard to like make them for the random tool that you're using. The nice thing I've seen about Fig is that it just it's a very simple JSON structure to describe what should be completed. And then it's all done within the UI of your OS, not like constrained to just your terminal, where like menus might not be the best thing in a terminal. Those might live better in the OS land. So
Indeed.
How have you liked it so far?
Indeed. I like it a lot. It's incredibly magical, and they've got a lot of broad coverage for a lot of the things that I use. So it just works for most things, which is amazing. I talked to the founders of that a little while back, and how they built that is just fascinating. So there's like this process that wraps your shell. So every like all your commands are sort of like running through that, and then when they see, hey, you're like trying to type something out, they actually use the accessibility API on Mac to figure out like, okay, where's your terminal, where's the input here, let me render this thing near you. And it's technically complicated and very magical, but it just works like a dream. It's great.
Yeah, we'll have to get those guys on.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah. The coolest integration I've seen so far is when you type npm install, you can tab complete and search npm straight from the terminal.
Yeah,
which is just like crazy. A
recent addition. I think they're hiring. If you're looking for a job out there, world, maybe they'll give me some swag for pitching for them.
Yeah, send swag, please.
Yeah. One of their long-term visions, which I think is really fascinating, and maybe even something that I would like to experiment with in the future, is like, what does the future of the terminal look like? Like, if we could re-envision this thing that's really hasn't changed much in all these years, what might that look like? I know that's gonna make a lot of people feel a lot uneasy, because they're just like, I just want my tools simple, man. But
yeah, it's always crazy to me that like computers started at the terminal, and now like the majority of computer users aren't gonna know how or what a terminal does, but that was like literally the only way to interface with a computer back in the day.
Yeah. And still oftentimes one of the better ways, in my opinion.
Yeah, I've recently been discovering the use of pipes and all that good stuff. I've never really been able to like really understand when I would want to pipe things to other commands and through commands, but I'm getting it more and more, which leads me into my last tooltip, which is my meeting light. I recently built a light that is connected up to my computer and automatically detects whether I'm in a meeting and turns the light on. It's actually on right now over there. And to do that, I used a terminal command called lsof, and I pipe that into grep, and now I actually understand what pipes do. So 10 years, check mark.
Yeah, so you have a good write up on that. We'll add that to the show notes too.
Yeah,
I guess
still need to hang it.
Oh yeah. The last thing for me is not necessarily a tool, more of a framework. I've always been super interested in front-end frameworks as they are. I mean, I got my start early, like in the Angular days, and I did a lot with Vue and React and Svelte and Marco and like, I don't know, a lot of them. They're just really interesting technologies. There's a lot of constraints. It's a hard space, and I really love to see people innovating. So the team behind Snowpack and Skypack, which Snowpack is a tool to sort of help you bundle things or something with ESM. I don't know. I'm sorry. I just butchered that. Skypack is a CDN for ESM, which I have a good grasp on what that is. But they're building a web framework called Astro. And it reminds me a lot of Svelte in a lot of ways. So Svelte is a front-end framework or components interface, I guess, that's compiler-based. So you have a template, and the compiler goes through, looks at what you put in the template, and then generates out runtime code, whether that's HTML, CSS, JavaScript. So Astro does that same sort of thing, but it's a little bit different. By default, it ships no JavaScript. So you build a page, and you have this Astro file, which looks a lot like a Svelte component or like an HTML file, really. And you can import components, and they can be React components, they can be Svelte components, in the future Vue components. You can use all these things together, and by default, it just server renders them and doesn't rehydrate them. But you can add this little tag to say, hey, I want this thing to become interactive when it's visible, or on the page load, or when the main thread is idle. And it will only sort of hydrate that one component in that one specified way. So they're flipping the sort of emphasis where we only ship JavaScript when you explicitly say, hey, I need interactivity. In my mind, this is huge because most pages for most things don't actually need JavaScript. It's like, I think of Artsy, and we're a huge React app. We use GraphQL and Relay, and we have like styled systems and styled components and all of these things, and it's like many layers of complexity, and performance is an issue for us for sure. But most of our pages have very little interactivity. So it's that notion where if you flip this on its head, maybe you can get some better performance. So shout out to that. I'll include their intro post to that. I think it's still in closed beta right now.
Yeah, that seems exciting. Still very early on, but exciting. I like how all these tools are taking a page from Next.js and using the pages folder. Like that is such great DX.
Yeah, for sure. Huge shout out to Next.js and the whole Versal team. Our devtools.fm site hosted on Versal and using Next.js. So it's great. It's good stuff.
Is that how you say it? I thought it was Vercel.
Oh no, maybe I said it wrong.
I'm sure I said their old name wrong too. I called it Zeet. I think it's Zeit. I don't know.
GIF, I don't know. Sue me.
Yeah, which one's peanut butter?